بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, it's a pleasure to announce that the whole city will be performing Eid tomorrow, Sunday, and in fact most of the world. So may Allah Azza wa Jal accept everybody's Ramadan and everybody's Taraweeh prayer, everybody's worship, everybody's fasting, everybody's du'as and tilawah. And Alhamdulillah, in an interesting way, when you talk to people, you share experiences, you get the feeling that lockdown became easier with fasting actually, rather than it being more difficult. So many families were able to worship and do ibadat together. Taraweeh was performed congregationally. Children, Children participated where they might not have otherwise participated. Often, sisters are not able to participate in Taraweeh prayer. They had that opportunity, particularly in households in which there are hufaz and those who had forgotten their Quran or parts of it were able to revise it. And we saw large numbers of households performing Taraweeh prayer with full khatams in their houses. Youngsters who had done hifz or were in the process of siblings sharing the burden of revision, alhamdulillah, labor of love for the Quran, and then delivering, reciting. So I think this Ramadan is going to be memorable as well for everybody, and inshallah it will have been a source of mercy and rahmah for us. You know, some of the ulama, they say that there's an anecdote, it's just a hypothetical sort of anecdote, but it goes like this, that, you know, Ramadan went away and people were complaining, oh, Ramadan came and it went so fast. And so Jibreel alayhi salam reappeared. He appeared before the people and he says, okay, Ramadan is going to happen for another month. And people said, no, it's okay, you can go. So it's just a made up story, of course, but the point is that when people complain that Ramadan has gone, do they really want it to come again so fast? Allah Azza wa Jal has given us 30 fard fasts, and that's all He asks of us, and sometimes 29. That's all He asks of us, fulfill the month, and no more. Anything else is nafal and tatawwu'. You don't have to do more than this. These are the fard fasts. And so the spirit when Ramadan is going away, the guest is leaving, should be that we are doing shukr as well. Shukr, that Allah Azza wa Jal has granted us the tawfiq to fast during this month. And so we close the ibadah with istighfar and dua, but also with lots of hope. Remember, you've been listening to this hadith annually from your ulama in your masajid, and you've been reading this hadith again and again. Man sama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaba. Whoever fasts the month of Ramadan with iman and hope of reward. Ihtisab, hope that Allah will weigh our a'mal and give us an ample share in reward. And with fasting, the reward is uniquely given in a different way anyway. Allah Azza wa Jal Himself gives the reward for fasting, as is mentioned in the Hadith Qudsi, As-sawmu li wa ana ajzi bihi. So what is this night? This is Laylatul Jaza. This is the night of prize giving. And it's also a Mubarak night. It's a night in which one should do ihya of the night, keep it alive by doing ibadah and zikr. And the day of Eid is a day of shukr. Shukr for the ni'mah of fasting and for the forgiveness which Allah has promised. And so, let us not forget this. In our deen, our celebrations are not separate from our spiritual devotions, our remembrance. And the mu'min never tries to forget Allah and turn away. This is not something which is a burden for the mu'min. Quite the opposite. A mu'min cannot enjoy life without following the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and remembering his creator, his owner, Allah Azza wa Jal, his master. So Eid should be performed according to the sunnah as far as this is possible. And what I mean here is also in terms of avoiding disobedience of Allah Azza wa Jal. So, alhamdulillah, we are where we are. alhamdulillahi ala kulli hal, we continue to make dua for those of our brothers and sisters who are in difficult circumstances because of illness, because of bereavement, because of financial difficulty, because of not being able to meet near and dear ones. Who would have thought that millions of people, free citizens, who have committed no crime, no war, no imminent danger on the streets in the form of a natural disaster, and yet people being unable to embrace one another and meet one another. And subhanAllah, when this happens, when it's actually happened, it's woken up in people a level of love that they didn't realize they had for each other. Is that not the case? So inshaAllah, the light at the end of the tunnel, we see a glimmer of hope, inshaAllah. We may be coming to the end of this, so we need to persevere, inshaAllah, and persevere with our deen, and also with good conduct. It's very sad when, on occasions like this, the night of Ramadan, when people's emotions are, how can we say, people are experiencing on an occasion like this mixed emotions. There's a degree of excitement. People are subdued because of lockdown. There are children in the family, there are elders in the family, whatever the situation. These are the situations in which shaitan comes along. Remember, Ramadan is over, and people can have an argument, a tiff. And so we see too many examples of people, families, who argue and who make each other unhappy because of just being a little reckless in language. So one person says something off the cuff which might be hurtful, the other person responds negatively, so the first responds even more negatively, and then there you have it. You have sparks and you have an explosion in that household. You have an argument, a quarrel, and that's what you don't want. So perhaps one of the lessons in Ramadan is to control our nufus, especially when we're spending more time together. Families ought to be happy. So alhamdulillah, for the greater part, in my experience, in our communities here, I've seen that families have actually gelled together and stuck together, and there's been a lot of happiness and bliss, and the barakat of ibadah has manifested its effect. But on the other hand, there have been situations where unfortunately people have had arguments and blow-ups and quarrels. So let us try to patch those disagreements as well, and this applies to relatives as well. So if you can't actually, then you can virtually visit and say salam to one another and share the greetings of Eid. And inshallah, the ulama say it's mustahab to say Eid Mubarak, Eid Sa'id to one another because it cleanses the heart. That's what it does. It creates love between people. So let's see what questions we have today.
These are the questions from last night, Mullah Sahib, that we didn't manage to cover, so we'll start with them first.
Yep.
When I listen to the Quran on audio and I recite the Arabics word by word, do I get the same reward as reading myself?
When I listen to the Quran in audio and recite the Arabic, do I get the same reward as reciting by myself? Because you are actually reciting, you get the full reward of recitation. Now the difference is, this is not part of your question, but if you listen to Ayatul Sajda from a recording, the ulama say you don't have to do sajda. But of course, if you're reciting it yourself, then you do. And if you hear someone in live recitation, then you have to as well.
How do we clean our hearts, especially reconciling with family and friends?
How do we clean our hearts, especially reconciling with family and friends? Right. There's no simple answer, is there? There's no simple answer. Let's look at this from various perspectives, and let's see if this inshallah, this helps, this opens things up to some degree. Let us understand that it's natural to be offended when someone offends you. It's quoted from Imam Shafi rahimahullah. He says a person, if you hurt someone and they're not hurt, then they're not a person, they're a donkey. You know, the refined characteristics of a human being, you don't have the thick skin of a beast, an animal which can carry such heavy loads. So it's human to feel hurt. But the same Imam Shafi rahimahullah, he has a beautiful poem, and the essence of that poem is that when someone causes me suffering, he says, Imam Shafi says, I become oud, I become wood, fragrant wood. He says, when someone causes me suffering, I burn, and I become oud, and I emit fragrance. So he's saying that even in my suffering, I think this is beautiful. This is wisdom and poetry mixed together. He says, even in my suffering, I become sweet. And the more I burn, the more fragrance I emanate. And this is the message here. So when your relatives cause you suffering, there's a saying in Arabic, al-aqarib kal-aqarib. Relatives are like scorpions. Scorpions bite. It's a painful bite. So when near and dear ones say something which is hurtful, then it's more hurtful because you expect better from them. But the point here is that your relationship with your relatives is not for their sake or your sake. It's for the sake of Allah. Because when it comes to relatives, there's an instruction in the Quran and Sunnah to maintain ties. And of the masarif, the places where we ought to spend by the instruction of the Quran, it's not just zakat and sadaqatul fitr, it's not just sadaqah here and there, it's also the relatives, the relations that you have of blood, kith and kin. We're supposed to spend on them. So when you give gifts to someone who's related to you, don't do it because it's a social exchange and they give gifts to you so you give them back fair and square. That shouldn't be the intention. Brothers and sisters alike should listen to this point carefully. Don't give a gift to relatives with the intention of a gift coming back, or because they give you one first. Give it with the intention of pleasing Allah. There is mukafa in Islam. If someone does a good turn to you, you should do a good turn to them, or do better than that if you possibly can. There is that. And if you can't, you do so much dua that you feel convinced that you've fulfilled the burden, the responsibility of giving something back. So if someone does a kind turn to you, do a kind turn to them by all means. But when you do a kind turn to them, don't do it because you want something back. وَلَا تَمْنُن تَسْتَكْثِرْ. Don't do ihsan, a favor towards someone because you want more for yourself. It's the wrong intention. So when you give and take from relatives, giving gifts to relatives, do it because it's an instruction in the Quran to spend on relatives. Really, gifts of money can be given to relatives. And it's not about a nice package, a nice parcel, a card, flowers. It's more than that. So all of these things are positive when it's to maintain the relationship. Now this is done despite the personality. So you don't choose your relatives, you choose your friends. You don't choose your relatives. You have what you have. And so you make the most of them. And you act in kindness towards them to please Allah. So this is one element. So I've mentioned here so far that when someone hurts you, it's natural to be hurt, and that's human. But don't internalize it. Don't internalize it. And, expand yourself a little bit. Have a bigger heart. And so what this means is, La ilaha illallah. How do I convey this point? How do I convey this point? Now let me give you an example. Perhaps this will help. Can any of you relate to this? You're listening to me right now. Can any of you relate to this? Where there may have been a family member who you didn't feel too much for until they became seriously ill, or until they had an accident or something happened to them. And then suddenly, your emotions woke up inside you. This often happens with siblings, young people, when they're not very old. Small children, for example, as people become adults, then all sorts of things can happen. They can become close or they can become apart. Children, when they disagree with one another temporarily, they can be very, very unhappy, adolescents, teenagers, with each other. But then what happens? Then that sibling of yours becomes ill or unwell. Something happens to them. And then the actual love which is embedded inside you, it wakens up. You'll have had this experience. Now, think of this same situation where this relative of yours, forget their tongue, because it's usually the tongue that's the problem. Forget that completely for a minute. And just see them as a human being. See them as a human being. Objectify them. Now, if a human being is in front of you, how do you treat a human being? Like a human being. So if this human being has a habit of saying things which are not pleasant, do you have to let everything register in your head? Do they even mean everything they say? Most people who say nasty things have no intention of hurting anybody all the time. Some people may have that intention. That's a sorry situation to be in. But from your perspective, understand that they utter things they don't necessarily. So just learn to ignore and see them. If you can be sorry for the person who is unhappy because of their relationships around them, and people like that who cause you suffering, they're likely to have unhappiness in their life as well. Then you can begin to be, if not sympathetic, empathetic. Understand their perspective. So this is one aspect. So I don't have a sort of a yes/no answer to this. How can you cleanse your heart? But what I will say is that These are some of the things which, and the Quran says, okay, let's finish with this because we always go back to the Quran. It's our source. We start from there, we go back to the Quran. What does Allah Ta'ala say in the Quran? Allah Ta'ala says, idfa' billati hiya ahsan. Respond with that which is better. Ahsan is better, ahsan is more beautiful. فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. Then the one between whom you and him is enmity will be like a close friend. وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا. Allah Ta'ala says, this is not given and achieved except by those who are patient. وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ. And this is not achieved, this is not given except to those who have a big share. Very fortunate people. So try to be one of those fortunate people. The Quran says, respond with the better word. And finally, if you do dua for the person, this may be heavy on your nafs, but if you do dua for the person who causes you suffering, ask Allah to forgive them, guide them, whatever, this dua will be a healing for your heart. It'll have a positive effect on your own nafs, because you'll have to lower the ego in order to make dua for them. You might not want to. And then on top of that, it will benefit them. And who knows, they may turn around and become your best friend. Another hadith. This answer is getting a bit prolonged, but let me just quote it to you. Beautiful hadith. أحبب حبيبك هونا ما عسى أن يكون بغيضك يوما ما أبغض بغيضك هونا ما عسى أن يكون حبيبك هونا ما. Beautiful words of advice here. Love your friend a little less because he may be your enemy one day. Hate your enemy a little less because he may become your friend one day. And in the commentary of this, the ulama say, when you're very close to someone, you tell them all your secrets, and then there's a problem and you fall apart, then you regret that they know so much about you. Similarly, when someone's your enemy and you argue with them, then sometimes you push them so far away that there comes a time when that's forgiven, the old mistakes are forgiven, and your mind is clear and you regret that you pushed them so far away, because now they want to be friends with you and you want to be friends with them. So in both situations, i'tidal, balance. Don't become too friendly with someone and don't become too far apart from someone. Luqman Hakim is quoted as saying, don't be so sweet that people swallow you and don't be so bitter that people spit you out. In other words, they should keep you in your mouth, which is what you put in your mouth, something you love. But don't let them swallow you and don't let them spit you out. Difficult balance. Allah grant us tawfiq. Ji.
When reciting really long surahs in your Tarawih or first prayers and you have no one to correct you, but you make a mistake, is your prayer still valid?
Reciting long surahs in Tarawih or Salah and no one to correct you and you make a mistake, is your Salah still valid? Depends on the mistake. If you make a mistake which changes the meaning, which is contrary to our aqidah and belief, so people are going to Jannah and your words imply that they're going to Jahannam or vice versa, there are some types of mistakes which will make the Salah invalid and there are others which won't. It depends on the mistake, so we can't give a general answer to that. What we would say is, if you're not confident in a particular surah, then revise it until you are, and then recite it in the Salah. فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ. Recite which is easy for you in your Salah. Ji.
If a Quran has a paper cover with slight glue attached to the hardback, but can be removed, does that still count as a removable cover, as in you can hold it without wudu?
If a Quran has a cover attached with glue and it can be removed, can you still use that to hold the Quran without wudu? No, you can't, because it's become part of the Quran. It's attached to the Quran. And even if it's not physically glued on, if, as people do, if you have a cloth cover which is sewn to the shape of the cover and it holds on to the cover by itself, it's like clothing for the cover, then that's counted as part of the mushaf, because it's not separate anymore. And this applies to any plastic covering which is put on. The only covering which doesn't count is something which is completely separate. So if you have a box in which the Quran is placed, or you have a juzdan, the traditional cloth bag in which the Quran is placed, and you zip that up, you put it in, and then you take it out to read, and you put it back in again, that covering is sufficient. You can hold the Quran with that covering on it. And you can wrap it up in a piece of cloth, such as a shawl, and you can carry it like that. Ji.
I have non-Muslim neighbours who insist on giving me food. I have explained to them that I can only eat halal foods, and they said they will comply. I've given a number of reasons of why I find this difficult, but they still continue to offer me food. What is the best thing to do?
Non-Muslim neighbours offer me food. I have explained to them that I can only eat halal food, and they still send me food.
No, they said they would comply.
They said they would comply and they send me food. You need to trust your heart on this one. It's absolutely permissible to eat food prepared by non-Muslims. There's no doubt about it whatsoever. And there's no difference of opinion here. As such, it's established. Otherwise you wouldn't have your packet of crisps, would you? Because you don't know who's made them. So per se, by definition, it's permissible to eat food prepared by non-Muslims. Yes, if there is an issue of contamination, then obviously this will make an exception. This will change the rule because of that situation. And that's why there's a lot of fuss, isn't there? In recent times, the media, you'll have been following the Whopper, the vegetable, sort of the vegan burger in one of the mainstream chains, and the contamination, it was being used cooked on the same grill, and the sort of protests that we heard about this in recent times. So when there's contamination, then of course you can't. So it's about, you need to ask your heart, are you contented that there's no contamination in that food? Is it being prepared with utensils that haven't been washed appropriately, in which food which you can't consume may have also been prepared? Or can you trust that it will be prepared appropriately? So you need to make a judgment on that one. Ji.
Is there an equal reward and benefit for reciting the Quran with wudu while reciting on your Quranic app or mobile phone, as opposed to reciting it on a traditional paperback copy?
If you repeat the question.
Yes, so the question is there equal benefit and reward for reading?
Equal benefit, okay. Is there equal benefit and reward from reciting the Quran in the state of wudu from a tablet or digital device, or from a mushaf?
Yeah.
I don't have a clear answer to this one. I'm not going to suggest that, but what I can say is that, this is not a fiqh ruling I'm giving you. I'm just sharing this with you. So consider it to be a thought, a sentiment. It's not a fiqh ruling, right? Our mashayikh, the Salaf Salihin in our present generation, I'm thinking of Sheikh Yunus, I'm thinking of Sheikh Zakaria rahimahullah, they stuck to tradition. They would like to stick to tradition. And so the muhaddithin, the ulama of this ummah, and there are many thousands in the world today like that, large numbers in Asia, in Arabia, they like to stick to tradition. The mushaf existed in the time of the Sahaba. So that is something which will stay till Allah wills, till the day of Qiyamah, the mushaf. And this is a substitute, it's not the actual mushaf. So why not use the mushaf and turn the pages physically, as Sayyidina Uthman did, as the Sahaba did? Sayyidina Uthman, I give his example because he used to recite the Quran a lot through the nights. He used to recite a lot of Quran. Why not stick to that tradition when you can? And when you can't, because perhaps you're traveling and you don't have a mushaf with you, then you can use the substitute, because it's permissible to use the substitute, but the substitute is always a substitute. In terms of reward, I can't comment. I can't speak on that point at this stage. Ji.
If you have been reading Salah sitting on a chair but were fit and healthy to read as normal, this is from yesterday's Q&A actually.
Sorry, can you repeat that particular?
So if you were reading Salah sitting on a chair.
Just bear with me, sorry.
Speech off.
Yeah, sorry?
If you were reading Salah sitting on a chair, but were fit and healthy to read as normal, the person has said that they've watched the Q&A last night, would I need to repeat my salahs?
If you were fit and normal and you were performing salah on your chair, would you need to repeat your salah? Absolutely. Look, the obligation of standing in salah is in the Quran in explicit words. وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. Stand before Allah with adab. So it's not an option. This is why if you want to revise your rulings on salah, then join us when we have a class on this subject and read upon it. Let me just quickly go through this. This is important. Inside salah, your standing is fard. Your ruku is fard. To stand up after ruku is farz. To do sajda is farz. To sit up between the sajdas is farz. To sit in the last at-tahiyyat is farz. And to sit in the second at-tahiyyat in the second rakat, where there are 3 or 4 rakats, is wajib. Okay? So you can't complete your salah without the fara'id. If you leave a rukn, the word rukn and fard both are used interchangeably sometimes in salah, because a rukn is a building pillar, it's a building block. It's a cornerstone without which the structure can't be completed. And the fara'id of salah are all its arkan. So standing is one of them. So yes, you do have to repeat those prayers. Ji.
Next question. What time can Fajr be prayed from today? Does the timetable revert back to the start time of Fajr 1:33?
What time is Fajr performed from today? Does it revert back? See, I do understand that we published some continuation of the timetable.
That's correct.
Yeah, for those who wish to keep the fasting of Shawwal. Look, it's like this. If you stick by the timetable you've been using in Ramadan, then that's been published, but no one is going to say to you that your fast, your optional fast, your nafil fast isn't valid if you begin it after 1:33, 1:35. Ji.
How can you make up 30 years of missed salah? If not possible, can one ask for forgiveness?
How can you make up 30 years of missed salah? If not possible, can one ask for forgiveness? See, begin the journey. There are people who have made up more salahs than 30 years, believe me. I can think of an example now. There was an elderly sort of gentleman in his old age in Bolton, and he read missed salahs in such great number that he made up all of his past life salahs. And I'm just giving you one concrete example I can think of this minute. There are others. You know, what do you do when you want to climb a mountain? You take one step at a time. If you are making the journey and your life comes to an end, at least you are walking towards your destination. Think of the man who was doing tawbah, and he's mentioned in hadith. And what happened is he had murdered in cold blood 99 men. And he went to a worshipper and he asked him, he says, "Can I be forgiven?" He says, "No, a person like you, forgiven?" So what did he do? He also killed him and completed his century. Think of the sins on his shoulders. But then he became remorseful, and he consulted this time a scholar, a person who had knowledge, and this person knew Allah, he had ma'rifah of Allah. He had knowledge. So he said to him, he says, "You can be forgiven," but he recommended to him that he travels to another land. He moves, he goes into better company. See what happens? What does the gangster need to do? He needs to change his company, doesn't he? That's how he's going to improve his life. His society needs to change. So he travels, and on the journey he passes away. He passes away, and the two groups of angels come to take his soul. The angels of adhab and punishment, and the angels of rahmah and forgiveness. And they disagree. The one group says that he never committed a good act in his life, and the other says he was on his path to tawbah. So they return to Allah and ask, and Allah Ta'ala tells them to measure the land on either side. Is he closer to the land of tawbah or to the land which he was coming from? And Allah, in another narration, it's mentioned that Allah Ta'ala, He instructs the earth on this side to stretch. And so the earth stretches on this side, and he passes away, dragging himself even in his final moments towards his destination. He's intent on turning a new page in his life. When the angels measure, there's one dhira' difference. He's closer to the land of tawbah and he's forgiven. So when you are on the path of tawbah, and remember there are two separate things. You owe Zayd some money and you haven't paid it on time. So you need to ask his forgiveness for delaying the payment. Or you took it unjustly from him. You need to ask his forgiveness for that. But you also need to pay it back. It's two separate responsibilities. Now, with salah, because it's an established fard, there's no exceptions. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. It's fixed at fixed times. So it's not going to be waived from your responsibility in the Sharia. It remains in your responsibility. Start making the journey and ask Allah to forgive you for missing the salah, because that's one sin. Then not performing the qada is going to be another one. And then perform as many as you can regularly. And the recommendation is that if you can't do more, then do one day's salah in one day, which is 20 rakats, 2 of Fajr, 4 of Dhuhr, you do all the sunan, and 4 of Asr, 3 of Maghrib, and 7 of Isha, which is the 4 Fard and 3 Witr, total of 20 rakats. So what you do is, one way of doing this is performing those extra rakats with every Fard salah, because you can perform Fard salah as qada even before and after Fajr, unless it's when the sun's actually rising and zawal and the sun's actually setting. And so with Dhuhr as well, with Asr as well, with Maghrib, with Isha, keep this up. And if Allah gives you the long enough life, inshallah, you'll complete the journey. And if you don't, at least you'll be en route. At least you'll have made the best effort that you can. So this is one approach. And the other is you allocate a bit of time in the day. Even if you perform salah slowly, it's not going to take you more than 20 minutes. And so and if you've been performing Tarawih in Ramadan, your 20 rakats, it'll be something you're used to. So this is when you You can do this anywhere. When it's time to have a break at work and you have space in an office, you can perform salah there. It's a very good way of using your time, and there'll be barakah in the rest of your time. But you do have to perform those salahs. So yeah, as I say, to summarize, you don't do them all at once anyway. It's not possible. So start making the journey, and inshallah, Allah Ta'ala will take you to the destination. Ji.
Is there zakat on money obtained from loans?
Is there zakat on money obtained from loans? No. You have to pay them back, so there's no zakat on money obtained from loans. Ji.
If you're unable to read Surah Al-Kahf on a Friday for whatever reason, is it okay to play it in the background?
Is it okay to play Surah Al-Kahf in the background if you've been unable to recite it on Friday for some reason? Look, it's not wajib to perform it to recite it on Friday, but you certainly should. You certainly should, especially in a time of fitna. It's a protection from the fitna of Dajjal. It's a protection for your iman. It's a nur for you for the whole week. So listening to the recitation in a recording is not a substitute. Look, it is an ibadah to recite the Quran, and it's an ibadah to listen to live recitation with adab. But listening to a recording is also a good act, but it's not a substitute for your own recitation or for someone reciting. So by all means listen to it, but that's not a substitute. It's not the same thing. So don't equate the two. Ji.
Is it permissible to give a non-Muslim a Quran with translation if you know they will touch it without wudu?
Is it permissible to give a non-Muslim a Quran without wudu if you know they're going to touch it without wudu? If you trust that they are going to, when you have a Quran with translation inside it, and there are notes and commentary notes, then as long as the part of the page is not touched which has the ayat on it, if there's more non-Quran than Quran, then the rules are different in handling the Musaf anyway. If you trust that the person is going to respect the Quran, then you can give the Quran to such a person. If you know that they're not going to respect it, then you shouldn't give it to them. Ji.
Please could you reiterate the importance of lockdown on Eid as our elders are still expecting to celebrate?
Could you reiterate the importance of lockdown on Eid as elders are still expecting to celebrate? See, the definition of celebration, what is Eid? Eid is Eid prayer, the Salah of Eid, and Eid is an occasion for not fasting, which means eating, and akl and shurb. We say eating and drinking, we don't mean drinking in the sense of alcohol, but drinking in the sense of drinking what is permissible to drink. So this is mentioned in the narration, akl and shurb, eating and drinking, and it's an occasion for spending time with the family. Now, the udhr, the reason why we're not congregating is this particular virus. And the same reason applies for family and friends. And so this kind of caution when there's a risk of contagion is established. The fuqaha say that this is something which our Sharia acknowledges, and therefore it should be seen as a necessary instruction, and people should abide by that. And that's all I can say. I mean, it's about individual sensibilities, isn't it? And if Allah wills, we'll get out of this. But yeah, people should not be reckless. They should observe the guidelines. Ji.
And we've come to the end of time on us.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people have questioned and asked, will you be doing tafsir and Q&A in this format moving forward? So I think to end, it'd be worthwhile.
Yeah, question, will we be doing tafsir and Q&A in this format? Inshallah we will, if you guys will join us. If you guys turn up virtually, you brothers and sisters, we'll inshallah. But the timing of that we're yet to announce. So it won't be the same timetable as Ramadan, but just watch the space that you're watching now, and I'm sure that you'll find an announcement there imminently, within a day or so, inshallah. Yeah. So as soon as we have the timetable ready, but definitely moving into the coming days and weeks, there'll be opportunities for you to join us online, and we will look forward to welcoming you to our programs, inshallah, in the form of durus, in the form of lectures, in the form of courses, inshallah. Ji.
Eid broadcast tomorrow, and we'd like to thank all of our viewers.
Yeah. So yeah, inshallah, you can join us for a live Eid bayan tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. You can join a little earlier, listen to the adhkar for the Urdu talk, and for the English one at 10 a.m. And so, inshallah, we'll be there. We'll be here. We'll be with you then, inshallah. For the moment, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.